Ready, Chase? The House will come to order. Members will be in their seats. The clerk has opened the roll, and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our guest chaplain, Pastor Jim Proof, pastor of Lenexa Baptist Church, guest of Representative Esau, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, but led by Representative Alford.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, I ask this morning that you would go before these men and women who have committed to serving the citizens of the state of Kansas. Lord, I would ask that you would give them wisdom and patience as they seek what is best for all of the people they serve. Lord, I ask that you bless them with your presence as they seek to legislate on the behalf of others. Help them to learn from each other as we would be learning from you, and that we would be seeking to understand what is right, what is pleasing in your sight. We know, Lord, that it may not be what we're comfortable with, what we're familiar with, or even, Father, what we agree with. But allow these servants of yours to hear from you today. And Father, I ask that you give these men and women safety as they travel back and forth to Topeka and to these chambers. I ask that you preserve and protect their homes and be near to their families. Lord, meet their every need. Please give them courage and encouragement today as they sacrifice on the behalf of us. And Father, we thank you for your good hand of favor that has been on this state at many times throughout our history. And I pray, Father God, that our best days as Kansans are ahead of us, and that this state can be a shining example to others in our country. Father, I ask all of these things in your Son's name. Amen.
Has every member had the opportunity to record his or her presence? The clerk will close the roll and take the attendance. Messages from the Senate. The clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bill 2435.
House Bill 2598 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will remain on the consent calendar for the second day. Senate Bill 267 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will remain on the consent calendar for the second day. Senate Bill 414 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will remain on the consent calendar for the second day. Final action. The clerk will read.
Substitute for House Bill number 2572 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning the Department of Commerce relating to the disclosure of economic development incentive program data, tax credit programs, and certain property tax exemptions, required database.
This constitutes final action on HB 2572. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 114 voted in favor and 7 against the passage of HB 2572, the same having received a constitutional majority, this bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Representative Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, body will consider for a concur House Bill 2106. 2106 was a bill that we passed out of the House last February 23rd of 2017. It was a bill having to do with treatment facilities and being able to use a nationally accredited agency to license and to inspect those facilities. We passed it out of the House 125-0. It went to the Senate, never received action last year. They took it up this year, and on February 14th, the Senate passed it out of their body 39-0. And with that, I'll stand for questions. Oh, pardon me. Thank you very much. The only change was that they changed the dates from 2016 to 2017. Sorry about that.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, you may close. Oh. Hold on a second. Representative Renan.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay, body. I would agree with the previous speaker. This is something that we need to take place for technical purposes in our communities. Thank you.
See no further discussion. You make your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 2106.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2106. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? 121 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of HB 2106. The same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Representative Waymaster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2362 is in regards to the alcoholic beverage control modernization fee. The underlying bill reduces the initial application fee for liquor licenses from $50 to $30 plus a $20 modernization fee. And the reason why the director of ABC has asked for this is because the current computer system is at risk due to lack of upgrades over the last 32 months, and a malfunction of the system could be costly. When we discussed this in committee, there was a sunset provision for the modernization fee that would sunset on June 30th, 2022, and revert the initial application fee to $50 on or after July 1, 2022. The Senate Committee on Federal and State Affairs amended the bill by removing the provision to sunset the modernization fee. This passed the House March 30th of 2017, 96 to 28, and just recently passed the Senate 37 to 3. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 2362.
Representative Wolf-Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I concur with the previous speaker's comments. When this bill was passed, it did not increase the fee, it just changed the allocation. So $20 of that fee will now go to upgrade this computer system, which is in dire need of this. We probably would have liked to have had the sunset in there, but nothing stops us from looking at this bill again at any time. So I do concur and would ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move my motion to concur with Senate amendments for House Bill 2362.
This constitutes final action on HB 2362. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? 111 voted in favor and 10 against the passage of HB 2362. The same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Representative Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2470 was a bill that we passed in the House 121 to 1. It had to do with the microbrewery bill that we passed out. It went to the Senate, and they made a number of changes to include an entire new Section 2. So, Mr. Speaker, I would move that the House non-concur to the Senate amendments to House Bill 2470, and then a conference committee be appointed. I'll stand for questions.
Is there discussion? Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After a discussion with the chairman on some of the changes that we saw in this bill, I feel it's a good motion to non-concur, and I support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other discussion? Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move my motion.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. As conferees for the House, the chair appoints Representative Barker, Highland, and Ruiz. Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, you'll remember that House Bill 2482 was the indelicately named Mimosa Bill. It was the bill that expanded the hours that a drinking establishment could serve alcoholic beverages to 6 a.m. to accommodate the brunch crowd and so forth, and to bring it in consistency with caterers and things like that. We sent a 3-page bill over with 75 votes, and the Senate, as they are uniquely qualified to do, turned it into a 10-page bill. And so at the very least, we want to be able to take a look at the changes, and there may be some good changes in there, or there may not, but we want at least a chance to look it over and talk it over. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House non-concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 2482, and that a conference committee would be appointed. I'll stand for questions.
Is there discussion? See none. Close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll renew my motion to non-concur.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion carries. As conferees for the House, the chair appoints Representative Mason, Corbett, and Whipple. Majority Leader Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items appearing under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carried. The chair appoints Representative Mason to chair the Committee of the Whole.
Good morning, all. We only have one bill on the agenda today, so we might as well get to it. This is Senate Bill 405, and for the purposes of carrying Senate Bill 45, the chair recognizes Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, several months ago, after poultry became a certain poultry company came in and said they wanted to make an investment in Kansas, leaders in agriculture and in the industry and KDHE and KDA looked at our statutes and realized that those standards that govern CAFOs, which is confined animal feeding operations for poultry that use dry litter, which is now the standard for that industry, were either non-existent or very unclear. So at that point, they decided to start looking at the scientific base behind putting together those numbers and put them into statute. And that is the bill we have for us today. This bill does two simple things. The bill would establish animal unit measurement calculation for chicken facilities that use a dry manure waste system as the number of laying hens or broilers multiplied by 0.003, which in birds is 333 birds. In addition, the bill would require a confined chicken facility to obtain a federal permit if that facility uses a dry manure system and confines 125,000 more broilers or 82,000 more laying hens. Those two are two issues in a way. The animal units deal with the separation distances that all confined feeding operations have to abide by and the environmental aspect of that. Just to give you a little bit of information, an animal unit, for one steer is one animal unit, and then everything, all the other animals are derived from that. So, as I said, 0.003 would be 333,000 boilers. Most barns have around 30,000 birds, and so you're looking at around 4 barns to get to the 125,000 range. The 125,000 range for a federal permit deals with nutrient management plans and federal permits. So it's actually two different things. With these standards, we are still more strict than most of the states around us, and most states don't delineate between those two, but we did in order to make the federal permit even more strict than other states. So I hope that you'll support this. It's an important bill to say that Kansas is open for business for poultry, something that the agriculture community wants. There are communities out there that are actively seeking companies to come in and begin making investments in their communities. And so I hope we can get this bill out quickly and clean, get it to the governor's desk, and so that we can those companies know what the standards are when they come in, and that we will say that Kansas is ready to become not only a leader in other agriculture, other animal productions that we already are, but also in poultry. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Are there members desiring to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Hauser of Cherokee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Down in my neck of the woods, we have a lot of turkey farms in the area, and litter's pretty useful down there, and they make some money off of it. I'll be supporting this bill, but I do have a question for the carrier.
Sure.
We might switch sides. I might need to make a quick getaway. Could you answer this one question for me? Why did the bill cross the aisle?
Oh.
Thank you very much.
I wish you'd have shared that earlier so I had something to say.
The chair recognizes Representative Carl Skint of Leavenworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad we started out with a bit of levity. Things will change here in a few moments. I want to share something, a little story with you, maybe not little, but on September the 6th of this past fall, then Governor Brownback came, it was announced that he was coming to Tonganoxie and there was going to be a press conference. Several in this body were invited and several were there. We went that morning and discovered the Tyson Signs, the leading leader in poultry, was there as well. And the governor announced that there was, in 90 days, there was going to be a poultry facility built about a mile or two outside of the community, and that it would cost $320 million. It would employ 1,600 people. And this plant would butcher 1.25 million chickens a week. And we also found out a little bit later that the city and county officials signed non-disclosure agreements that they could not speak about this and they could not, visit about this until it was announced, and that's part of industry, and I totally understand that. None of the local legislators were aware of this, myself, the other representatives from Leavenworth County, or the senators from Leavenworth County. And we also found out that the county commissioners pledged $500 million in incentives for this multi-billion-dollar facility to come to our community. We also found out that there would be 200 to 250 chicken houses needed in the surrounding area to provide the opportunity for this facility to butcher 1.25 million birds per week. And in all full disclosure, I want you to know that it became a personal thing for me as well, because my home was about 2 miles from where this plant was to be located. And we are on well water, which was a concern for me at the time too. In the days following, attempts were made to contact the governor's office, Department of Commerce, this multi-billion-dollar poultry firm, KDHE, with no response. I will say that there was one person from the Department of Agriculture that worked with us very closely. In fact, I talked to him a lot in the pursuing days. However, opposition grew and grew in our community. After the announcement was made, I started questioning. I started, talking to people that live in the area that have these plants now, the poultry farms. I visited Monette, Missouri. I have relatives there, and they shared with me what it was been like about the last 15 to 20 years and how the culture in Monette had changed. I talked to people, I talked to farmers in Arkansas, and I talked to farmers in Kentucky about the commercial poultry business. I also began working with Johns Hopkins University and the Department of a Livable Future. Then on September the 15th, which is the Friday following this happened on Tuesday right after Labor Day, there was a town hall meeting that there was 3 of us that conducted the town hall meeting. The senator from our area, the representative from the 38th district who's sitting here with us right now, and we had a town hall meeting. It was on a Friday night. It was a beautiful Friday night. Over 2,500 angry residents showed up. Nearly, I won't call them a lynch mob, but it wasn't far from it. They wanted answers, and we couldn't give them answers. There had been attempts to contact Tyson that leading poultry leader, with no attempt. However, there was an attempt by this group to fly some local residents and even legislators to a plant in Tennessee, which they did. And I was not able to attend to go that day because there was a death in my family and I couldn't go. After that meeting, we compiled the questions that the residents brought to us, and we sent out letters. And it took 4 weeks for one of the institutes or departments in this state to return our response. So some of the things that and then it was about 2 weeks afterwards that the Leavenworth County Commissioners withdrew their incentives for the $500 million that they had incentivized the company for, and things started to calm down. But some of the things I discovered in my research, I found out that the plant would use 7 gallons of water per bird to butcher these chickens. That is 9 million gallons of water a week to slaughter and process these chickens. 9 million gallons. I've heard there's a water shortage in Kansas. The children of the 80% of the workers of this workforce from this plant would be eligible for free and reduced lunch because of the jobs that were coming to town. Some of the workers in these plants on the line have to wear adult diapers because they don't have an opportunity to use the restroom because of the intensity on the lines. This type of endeavor is not agriculture, but it's corporate poultry. Corporate poultry is a system where a company owns the birds, they own the feed, they own the veterinary services, and they own the processing plant. I've heard a lot about, I talked to farmers on this, and I heard from them that how they might want to, build a barn and raise a barn, because it was going to take 200 to 250 barns that would house 25,000 chickens each to supply this plant. And one thing I found out in talking to people in other states, that the farmers own the debt and the farmers own the manure, and that's it. There would have been farmers that would have had the opportunity to sell grain to this facility. And I found out from farmers in these other states that at first it's great until they get into you remember the days of the gas wars? Well, they conduct grain wars on pricing. In my research, I found farmers that make the company mad, they will receive inferior birds, they will receive inferior product. And it was also reported that farmers weren't even able to be present when the birds were weighed. In working with Johns Hopkins University, I discovered quite a bit of scientific research. And on Tuesday in committee, when we heard this bill, I presented a scientific annotated bibliography of 31 research studies dealing with public health concerns related to industrial food animal production. And these include infections resulting from transmission of harmful microorganisms from the operations to nearby residents, respiratory problems resulting from increased exposure to air pollution from animal operations, multiple negative human health impacts due to increased exposure to ground and/or surface water that are contaminated by manure from these operations via flies, filth, and contaminated air and water. On Wednesday morning, a representative from K-State came to our caucus to promote the poultry industry. One of his comments made a significant impression on me. He was discussing what a poultry processing plant of the future would look like. In his sharing what a plant would look like in the future, he told us that the plant would need workers that are high-tech and know how to work with robotics, because the plants would be moving to full automation. What really hit me was, what if the plant brings 1,600 workers and 80% of them are line workers? What happens to these workers and the community that has nearly 1,300 workers out of a job? Because of what happened in Tonganoxie, by the citizens being told they were going to have this processing plant with no opportunity of citizen input, and there would be up to 200 to 250 chicken houses in the surrounding area, the uncertainty of stability of the workforce in a processing plant, as well as the potential health concerns of the processing plant and the chicken houses. Mr. Chair, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears long. Would you care to explain?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will explain. The amendment gives the local citizens the opportunity to, when a county is approached and the county commission approves a facility, it gives the citizens an opportunity to circulate a protest petition which would require 5% of the registered voters and then if 5% were found to be adequate and legitimate, there would be an election. That's basically what it is. And in committee, we attempted to bring amendments, one similar to this. I brought one that had to do with the chicken houses themselves, and it raised a lot of concern, and legitimately so, because there could be multiple counties involved, and that would have some impact and some frustration and uncertainty. But with this, the one county would have the opportunity, the citizens of that county would have the opportunity to put this to a vote. Now, some of the comments in committee was, an election is expensive. Election's not cheap, and I'll certainly admit to that. But I do think it's worth our time and our money if a community and the culture of that community is going to be impacted. I feel like that if, in our situation in Leavenworth, we have a 3-member county commission. We are in the southern part of the county. Okay, 3 people have the opportunity to decide if you're going to have something, whether you want it or not, and they're going to give $500 million away to a multi-billion-dollar company. I think people need a say. And so I'll stand for questions.
Is there an objection to the waiving of the reading of the amendment? There isn't an objection. The clerk will read. Yes, clerk will read.
Page 1, following line 6, by inserting new section 1A1, prior to the establishment of poultry processing facilities that process more than 250,000 poultry per year in any county in the state on or after July 1, 2018, the Board of County Commissioners, by resolution, may permit or deny such facilities to be established within the county. Such resolution shall be published once each week for 2 consecutive weeks in the official county newspaper. The resolution shall take effect 60 days after final publication unless a valid petition in opposition to the same is filed. Number 2, if within 60 days of the final publication of the resolution, a valid protest petition to submit the resolution to the qualified electors of the county is signed by qualified electors of the county, equal in number 2, not less than 5% of the electors of the county who voted for the office of Secretary of State at the last preceding general election at which such office was elected, and is filed with the county election officer. The county election officer shall submit the question as established in subsection C of whether such poultry processing facility shall be allowed to be established in such county at the next state, county, or special election. B, number 1. The Board of County Commissioners, upon a petition filed in accordance with subsection B2, shall submit to the qualified electors of the county a proposition to permit such poultry processing facilities to be established within the county. Number 2, a petition to submit a proposition to the qualified voters of a county pursuant to this section shall be filed with the county election officer. The petition shall be signed by qualified electors of the county, equal in number 2, not less than 5% of the electors of the county who voted for the office of Secretary of State at the last preceding general election at which such office was elected. The following shall appear on the petition. We request an election to determine whether poultry processing facilities that are used for the processing of more than 250,000 poultry per year shall be allowed to be established in blank county. Number 3, upon the submission of a valid petition calling for an election pursuant to this subsection, the county election officer shall submit the question as established in subsection C of whether such poultry processing facility shall be allowed to be established in such county at the next countywide election that occurs more than 60 days after the petition is filed with the county election officer. C, in any election established pursuant to this section, the following shall appear on the ballot.
The objection has been raised. Representative Carl Skint, would you like to continue?
I would like to make a couple comments before I stand for questions. I know there are communities in this state that want the chicken processing, and I'm great with that. But I do think that we need to have the opportunity for those, for citizens in those communities to have input. So I will stand for questions.
For the purpose of speaking to the amendment, the chair would recognize Representative Hibbard of Greenwood. Excuse me, Representative Hoffman.
Representative, can you stand for a few questions?
Yes, sir, I will.
So this deals with the poultry processing facilities, much like we had an amendment almost exactly like this in committee. Is that true?
We did have an amendment similar to this in committee. This was tweaked somewhat based on the questions that were raised in committee, but it is in essence the same amendment.
Okay, and that amendment failed?
I think there was maybe 6 or 7 people that voted for it.
Yeah, I believe that's right. It failed 6 to 16. So, okay, thank you. Colleagues, I was going to challenge the germaneness of this, but I think we'll just... This is not part of the underlining bill. This deals with a community holding up the process of allowing a facility to come in. I will contend that Tonganoxie held up the process without saying we're not going to allow any facilities in this state unless there is a vote. The people of Tonganoxie spoke. They said, we don't want these facilities in our area. They rose up without us at the state dictating that all of this has to happen. If you look through this, this will take months, possibly a year for this to be resolved. In that amount of time, I can guarantee you those companies are going to be looking at other areas, and they'll have to start all over. This is unneeded. It was defeated in the committee, and I hope that we'll defeat it here. It has nothing to do with the underlying bill. I imagine if we would say it's challenge the germaneness, I don't think it would pass it. But let's just, instead of going through all that, let's just defeat it and get on with the underlying bill.
The chair recognizes Representative Hibbard of Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What happened in Tonganoxie, I think, was an embarrassment for all of us and shouldn't have happened the way it did. But the final thing that did happen up there is the people of Tonganoxie and their administrators come together and refuse the plant. But what we need to remember is the day that they tore up the sheets, so to say, with Tyson and sent 1,600 jobs sailing out of Kansas. Within a month, Tyson was announcing the operation had been introduced. The same factory that was to be in Tonganoxie was going to be in Tennessee. 1,600 jobs will never get back. This amendment will virtually destroy any opportunity for poultry production and processing in Kansas, because nobody, no business is going to want to wait the time period that is stated here. Number one, you've got to publicize it. Number two, you've got like 2 months to pick up the petition names, and those names have to be investigated and checked out. And then if it's like the old bill, it's stated 2 months later, you could think about having an election, but don't have it until you have a regular election, which means that it could be 5 or 6 months up to better than a year before you would give that company a yes or a no whether they could come to your community. That isn't the way big business works. I think we know it, and I think we realize that this petition is designed to kill the bill, and I ask you to vote no on it, and let's get on down the road.
Representative Carl's Kent. Okay. Chair recognizes Representative Blex of Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just basically have a comment. Some of these has already been covered, and I don't agree with the lack of transparency that went into Leavenworth County. I think it was improperly conducted. However, I am really not a fan of legislation by petition. I think it has its place, but when you look at the time delay and the expense, most counties is $10,000 to $20,000 to do that election, and the time element. I would much more prefer that, those local voters, they do have transparency because they see their local county commissioners a lot more often than they see us. They're in the coffee shops, and I think a better process is to do exactly what happened in Leavenworth County, because I'm of the opinion no self-respecting company is going to come into any county without a huge 10-year tax abatement and a huge financial incentive. And the county, once the county commissioner pulled that, it went away. I will not support this amendment. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Sloan of Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the body, I'm the one who in committee offered an amendment similar to this, but it was part of a four-part amendment that was offered. One part had to do with sort of the local control that the carrier of this motion is replicating. One part had to do with a setback from property lines. One part had to do with the requirement for requiring a state permit for manure or nutrient handling, and another part had to do with the Department of Agriculture updating their poultry health regulations. The question was not divided, so the chairman of the committee was correct that the amendments overwhelmingly failed, but it was not a vote on this amendment. It was a vote on a much larger thing. With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Representative Resman of Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little known fact, there's probably only a couple of representatives in this chamber that probably know about this. At the same time Tonganoxie was dealing with their chicken plant, there was a quick freeze plant that was trying to go in at New Century Airport. It was going to be an 8-story building, and with a temperature of minus 40 degrees, and it was designed to quickly freeze meats. And I don't know if the plant in Tonganoxie would have been using this facility, but the same set of circumstances happened. It was sprung on the local citizens, and they rallied. They sued the county commissioners. They got several members of this chamber involved. We all wrote letters, and this community organized. And what happened was the company decided to be a good neighbor and not build at New Century. So this amendment is really not necessary. If there's something people don't want in their community, they can organize, they can sue, they can do whatever they need to. They don't need an amendment like this or a law to prevent something from going in the community. Like I said, there was an incident that happened at New Century similar to Tonganoxie, and not too many people know about it, but the company did decide to move. So I oppose this amendment. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Carlin of Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to get verification from the revisor's office, but it is law. As my understanding is, you can already petition about the plant. Really thought about challenging the germaneness on this question, but I think it's a good thing that we have the discussion. It won't affect what happens on the barns. That's my understanding. I think it will affect the the petition process won't affect the barns, and this bill is about the barns. But if you add this and it's already there, it's just redundant, and that's not a big deal, but I think it's already in law. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there others who wish to speak to the Carlskin amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things regarding one of the representative's comments because of the length. You know, and I see that, and with the popularity of write-in ballots, I think that that could be changed to go with a write-in ballot instead of wait till the next general election. I would certainly take that in consideration. And I want everyone to know that this isn't for this is per county. You know, if for example in Leavenworth County, the citizen would have an opportunity, and it's been mentioned that the citizens spoke in Leavenworth County or in Tonganoxie and Leavenworth County. They spoke loud, and it was finally decided that 2 of the 3 commissioners, we have a 3-commissioner system, 2 of the 3 commissioners voted to withdraw those incentives. Now, I don't know about the counties that most of you are from, but I know Leavenworth County has a colorful history of, I want to be kind to the commissioners. They're interesting people, and sometimes I question their stability. But in the example of Leavenworth County, 2 people can decide what a community, what a county can do of 3 people. And in rescinding those incentives, there was 1 voted against it, 2 voted for it, and 1 of them that voted for it resigned from the commission right after that vote was taken. So, maybe you're in different counties than I am, but they're all humans, and they're impacted by the dollar signs. So, but it is per county. If Leavenworth County doesn't want it, they could circulate a petition. In committee, we heard about Montgomery County wanting it, Cloud County wanted it, and I would certainly support this. But I do think that we are here to represent our constituents. We're not here to represent all the emails that we've received from the ag lobbyist here over the last few days. We came to represent our constituents. So with that, Mr. Chair, I move my amendment.
You've heard the motion to amend by Representative Carlskin. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes appear to have it. Division's been called. The clerk will open up the roll, and you may record your vote. Seeing 15 hands, a roll call is in order. Has everyone had an opportunity to vote? Clerk will close the roll. Does anyone care to change his or her vote? Representative Arnberger votes no. Are there other changes? Seeing none, 40 voting in the affirmative, 78 in the negative, the motion fails. And we're back on the bill. The chair recognizes Representative Horn of Douglas. Excuse me, the clerk will record the vote. Now we recognize Representative Horn of Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues. As many of you know, I represent the 10th district, which is Douglas County. So I have a portion of my county that is very urban, that is Lawrence. I have a small city, Baldwin City. And then I also have a large section of the county that is rural. So I have been hearing from both sides on this issue since last fall. So I wanted to let you know that I've been doing a lot of work on this and hearing from my constituents on this. I think there's an improvement to be made to Senate Bill 405 that I think would make it easier for us to answer to all of our constituents, both those that are opposed and those that are in support of this bill. So I would like to introduce an amendment to Senate Bill 405.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 2, line 28, by striking 0.003 and inserting 0.008.
Representative, you care to explain?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've only been here 8 weeks, but I know better than to call this a simple amendment. But it is a little technical and wonky, so I'd like to walk you through my thought process about this amendment, and I'd like to direct you to have, or ask you to have two things to make it simpler. First is page 2 of the bill, and then your cell phone calculator. So if you can have those handy, I think that'll make this a little bit less painful. Okay, so if you look at page 2 of the bill, lines 31 to 33, it states that a chicken facility using a dry manure system shall obtain a federal permit if it confines 125,000 broilers. This is current federal law. It's enforced by EPA through our Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And according to the testimony provided to our Agriculture Committee from the KDHE, this limit of 125,000 birds is used to define the animal thresholds for federal waste permit. It's called the NPDES permit. It is largely based on the phosphorus content of the litter, and it is currently EPA regulation. This requirement allows KDHE to ensure that the chicken waste is handled properly and when it's applied as fertilizer, that it doesn't damage our environment. This is good. 125,000 is a science-based limit determined by our agencies that protect our air and water, and it was added to the bill in a group meeting with KDHE present, KDA, and the ag industries supporting it. So the proponents of this bill knew that 125,000 birds was that limit. The other key piece of this bill, so setting the 125,000 birds aside, the other key piece of this bill is also on page 2, lines 27 to 28. And this is the section, as the chairman said, that the KDA asked us to update, and this is the definition of the animal unit. So most of the bill uses this number of 1,000 animal units, right? So it would be 1,000 cows, because a cow is one animal unit, right? So most of the bill uses that 1,000 figure. So now to pull out your calculator. So KDHE's testimony to us in the Agriculture Committee stated that KDHE's current use of an animal conversion unit of 0.008 equates to 125,000 broilers to reach that 1,000 animal unit. So if you take 1,000 divided by 0.008, you get 125,000. So currently, KDHE uses 0.008 as their animal unit. So if Tyson came to town last September, they would have had to, and the farmers wanted to put up chicken houses, they would have used this 0.008 animal unit conversion. And if a company came to town today, before we passed this law, then they would be using that 0.008. And that is for a dry manure system. However, if you look at the way the bill is drafted currently, lines 27 to 28, you'll see that the recommended multiplier is 0.003. So what does this mean? Why is this multiplier even important? What it does is it impacts two parts of the bill. So if you flip to page 4, you'll see on line 19 that limit determines when a permit is required by the Secretary of Agriculture. And then on page 5, lines 23 to 30, you'll see that it relates to the setbacks, or how far back these chicken facilities, the houses, can be from habitable structures. So if we leave it at 0.003, that will mean that the permit and the setbacks on page 4 and 5 will be triggered at 333,000 birds. So that's 11 of these houses. So with the 125,000 number, you have 4 of these houses, that triggers a federal pollution permit because there's that much waste that could be generated. If we go to the .003, that means the rest of the bill says that 11 houses trigger these other mechanisms. So what I'm getting at is I think there are inconsistencies in this bill. If our agencies and our ag industry agree that 125,000 birds is enough to trigger a federal pollution permit, then I think we should be consistent in the bill. If we amend the bill, as I suggest, to .008 as the conversion figure, then all 3 triggers in this bill would be consistent. So the trigger for a federal pollution permit, the permit from the KDA secretary, and the setbacks would all be consistent in this bill. So I want to be clear, this amendment does not mean that we're closing ourselves off to the poultry industry. You can still, as a producer, have as many barns as you can economically support on your property, and this economic opportunity will still be available to the farmers and ranchers that want it. What this minor amendment does is makes the bill internally consistent and ensures that when producers in your county choose to contract with companies to produce broiler chickens, that when they reach this production scale of 125,000 birds, that our waste management and setback policies are aligned. I think it provides clarity so that when poultry processing companies come to Kansas, the rules will be consistent, they'll be based in science. It only impacts the poultry pieces of this bill. This will not impact other livestock operations. I know that many of you are hearing from constituents on both sides of this bill. I think this amendment is a compromise that will help us address them both. I would ask you to support this amendment, and I will stand for questions.
Speaking to the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Hoffman.
Stand for some questions. Okay, so you're saying that the .00, well, first of all, was this brought to committee?
No, it was not.
Okay, so this amendment was not brought to committee. The .008 you're saying is in working documents for KDHE.
That is correct.
Where did they come up with that number?
By taking the federal number of 125,000 and the animal unit of 1,000 and dividing 1,000 divided by 125,000.
Okay.
That's in their testimony.
So there's no scientific data behind it?
It's all the science of the EPA. Oh, I'm sorry. It's all the science behind it is the science behind the Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay. Under the bill, 125,000 is once you reach 125,000, which is only about 4 or 5 barns.
Yep.
Okay. You have to have a federal permit.
That is correct.
Most states do not delineate between the two.
The two.
Between whether or not the .003, which deals with setbacks and other things like that, or the 125,000 just saying you have to have a federal permit at 125,000. Most states don't delineate between that, do they?
I'm not certain. That's a good
Okay.
question.
All right. I would say that most states don't. What is NRCS's standards for animal units for poultry dry fertilizer? I mean dry litter.
So if I recall from the testimony from the Secretary of Agriculture, I believe it's that .003.
It's .0026.
Okay.
What's the Western? There's another standard. The Western.
Yeah.
Should have that right out here. It's the Western. You find it before I do?
I don't have it either.
I got so many papers here that.
Yeah, I just have KDHE and KDA.
Here it is. Okay. The Western Plan Service, which is what a lot of states use, theirs is .002. So whether we use the Western Plan Service or whether we use the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a national, they are both less restrictive than .003. Am I right?
That is correct.
Okay. So you want to make Kansas even more restrictive than any other state. Do you know of any, well, before you answer that, do you know of any other state that is at .008?
I do not, but because we had a hearing on Tuesday and worked the bill on Wednesday, I haven't had a ton of time to do research into what other states have.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure. Can I answer the first part of the question? Do I want it to be more restrictive?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first part of the question was, do I want Kansas to be more restrictive than other states? And that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm trying to do is, I feel like the bill has some internal inconsistencies, and what I would like to do is make all the numbers match, so that when a producer knows, hey, I'm going to put up 4 or 5 of these chicken barns on my property, I know that means I need a federal permit. I know that that means that I need to go talk to the Secretary of Agriculture and make sure that they know about this operation. And it also then means that I need to set it back a little bit further my property so that it is not close to homes, schools, and businesses. That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, this will make Kansas more restrictive than any other state. This will be saying, no, we really don't want poultry consumption, poultry production in the state. This makes us way more restrictive than any other state. As far as the setbacks, even with the changes in setbacks, our setback is more than any other state around us. And so I hope that you will take the science that was behind the .003. As I said, that is even more restrictive than the national average of .0026, or the Western planned service standard of .002. I hope you will take that scientific standard. It's more conservative. It's less restrictive than the .008, but it's a little bit more restrictive than the national average. So I hope you will keep that and not vote for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Representative Kelly of Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't necessarily have a question, but being from one of the counties that this could apply to, I've had a lot of meetings and listening and going to presentations to hear about poultry operations. And the .003 was calculated by Kansas State University with their poultry specialist. And so I put a lot of faith in our state universities and what they do and their desire to do things correctly. What this amendment at .008 effectively puts poultry operations out of the state of Kansas. It takes 6 to 8 houses in that range to be profitable. That takes about 220 acres to have those facilities there. At .008, it would make it where it could not be profitable. And so what the amendment's effectively doing is not protecting the environment or making things even. It's basically killing the chance of poultry to come into the state of Kansas. In Oklahoma, right next to where I live, there's no setback requirements. So there are states around us that have poultry, could expand it. This would kill it in Kansas. So I would ask that you would please vote against this amendment.
The chair recognizes Representative Lewis of Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get too far out in the weeds on this, I wanted to come to the well and share some information with the body. I have a poultry facility in my district that I'm familiar with. I've been on the site and I drive by it fairly often. This is just on the northwest side of Chase. This facility, now I gave some testimony about this or shared some information in committee on this. And I'll correct myself a little bit this morning because I wanted to be sure my numbers were correct, so I called the manager again this morning. I said in committee that this facility was permitted for 2.5 million birds. I stand corrected. They have 2.5 million birds on site. They are permitted 3.9 million birds. Now, I've been on this site. I did not find an issue with odor. I did not find an issue with dust. I saw no red flags that would tell me or indicate there was a pollution problem here. So let's not go out in the weeds on this too far. I will be voting against this amendment, but I do support the underlying bill. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Carlskin of Leavenworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It probably won't surprise you that I will support this amendment. And I didn't want to take any more of your time when I was up here earlier when discussing the environmental impact that the poultry industry has. I think the representative, has a reasonable amendment. Is it compared to some of our other states in the area? Maybe they're more liberal. But I've got a list here of all the violations that have taken place with respect to our water, our air, our environment, and I'm not going to read them to you. If you want a copy, I'd be happy to provide them to you. But let's think about what this is doing to our state, and I will support this amendment. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Deere of Leavenworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand in front of you in support of this amendment. I have been hearing from many, many constituents from Leavenworth County that one of their biggest concerns was the proximity and closeness of one of these facilities to where they live, where their children go to school, those types of things. And this would improve upon that. And I think by doing that, it would help address some of the health issues that have been brought to our attention by the other representative from Leavenworth County. And as the further they're set back from our properties, the less health risks would be involved. And I do like the part about where it keeps the bill consistent with the .008 throughout. So thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Schrader of McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm here to bring some attention to something that I believe people sometimes overlook in this bill or may jump to a conclusion on. And that is simply that when we're talking about these types of animals, they are growing animals. They start out in the barns as chicks, very small chicks. And as they grow over time, of course, they produce more litter or manure or whatever you prefer to call it. So that is the science behind basing the animal units as .003, because they're not full-grown birds when they start out. They're very much smaller, so they produce much less litter. If you look at the bill, you will see that the laying hens there are 82,000 layers allowed, whereas these broilers, 125,000. So laying hens are, over the life of their usefulness, they are larger animals than the broilers are on average. So that is the science behind this, that they begin as small birds and they produce less litter. Of course, over time they grow, but that's what's behind the number that was brought to us as .003. So I will stand against this amendment because it is researched, it is documented how they came up with that number. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there others who wish to speak to the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Horn, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the robust discussion on this amendment. I want to make a couple points before I close. First, all manure is not created equal. So chicken manure has much higher concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus, and I think we need to take that into account when we're setting legislation about chicken facilities. So the much higher concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus mean that there is a much higher environmental impact, and therefore I think we should use a higher animal unit number of .008 to account for that. Also, these things are great for calculators, but you can also do some quick research, and I found out that Georgia, Wisconsin, and Missouri all use .008 as their animal unit conversion. Georgia is the nation's leading poultry producer. The last thing I want to close with is that I really do believe this is about internal consistency in our bills and our policies. I think it is bad policy to have different numbers and different pieces of the bill that may confuse both farmers and ranchers and the industry. And the final thing I want to point out is the biggest impact of moving it from .003 to .008 has to do with those setbacks on page 5. What this will do is when a farmer or rancher wants to have a larger chicken facility on their property, it will move it further back in their property, further from habitable buildings, further from schools, further from homes. And I think that's what you're hearing from people when you have constituents asking you to vote no on this bill, is the fear that one of these will be in their backyard. And I think this goes a long way to address those concerns. So thank you, and I ask you to support this amendment.
Do you wish to renew your motion?
I move my motion.
You've heard the motion to amend by Representative Horn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? No. The chair is in doubt. Clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Seeing 15 hands, the roll call is in order. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Seeing none. 44 voting in favor, 75 against. The motion to amend fails. We're back on the bill. The chair recognizes Representative Clark of Geary County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak basically toward the industry of agriculture in the state of Kansas. I had the experience of spending time in Alabama for a number of years where I leased hunting land from a gentleman. This gentleman had 5 600 by 60 foot chicken houses with large numbers of chicks and chickens in these houses. The big thing that I want to impress on this body is that it's not how we reduce the expense or increase the revenue, it's whether or not we do increase the expense and increase the revenue. This gentleman sold chickens to to a large company, in which he was reimbursed very well. He bought a spreader truck. He eliminated the litter from these houses about once every 3 to 4 months. There's a process that they use with chicken litter where they use a system called crusting. They go into the house, they spray the litter with a compound. It gets very hard. The intake and external fans that go through these chicken houses dry the litter even more than it was, because a lot of the science that you've heard about with these chicken houses and wet manure or wet litter, was when they used overflow watering systems. So it was very wet in these houses. Today, they use drop water dispensers that's activated by the chick when they go up and basically tap it. It drips water out. At any rate, he sold what litter he didn't use on his farm. And he used his own truck, but the increase in the revenue helped him pay his houses off about 5 years earlier than was expected on his total investment. The only time that I was ever around those houses was when I would go to his house to pay my leasing fee, which was right next door to the houses, within 50 feet. There were also 2 other houses on the other side of these chicken houses within probably 150 feet. There was never any odor, no feathers flying around like I've heard in the past, no mobs of flies that you could grab out of the sky by the handsful. They were very, very clean, well kept, and without odor. Now, he would spread this litter in the areas where we would hunt, and the only time you would ever get any type of odor at all is if you walked across that field the day that he spread it. And then there was a small ammonia odor. And I think you're going to hear another one of our colleagues get up and talk about the basic science of fertilizer and nitrogen and phosphorus content and what the advantage is to chicken litter over commercial fertilizer. So I want you to keep in mind that this, I can understand, can be a debate between whether or not we have or don't have poultry in the state of Kansas. It can also be based on whether or not it's close to or far away or not in an area that is largely populated. But the main concern that I have is this is a very, very good alternative business for the state of Kansas and agriculture. And I will be supporting this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Representative Blex of Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologize for the second time. For those of you that don't know, I'm a retired wildlife biologist. It kind of maybe surprised you that I'm up here supporting this. Actually, in my second job, I work for a grant-funded EPA on the Middle Neosho River system from Chanute down the Oklahoma-Kansas state line. And in that job, we recognized water quality, and we actually developed, one of the individuals from K-State, PhD, was there yesterday or day before at our committee. We actually developed a ranking score sheet to protect and do the proper storage on each individual farm when litter is hauled out. That's based on sensitive groundwater, slope, soil type, and a lot of other factors. And if it doesn't meet the test or the criteria, the ranking, there's no cost share available. So that is one way we are actually protecting water quality, and that's what is very sensitive and very important. The average ton of poultry litter, depending on what type, hen will have a higher nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium content, but normally it's about 50 to 60 units per ton. The normal application of dry poultry litter in our area is about 2 tons per acre. And the one thing it's a renewable resource. It can and does stink when it gets wet. We encourage best management practices to producers to incorporate that, and that minimize that time. Things you don't think about. Years ago, that's all we had. We did not have commercial fertilizers. We used animal manure to grow our crops. It has a lot of trace minerals in it that commercial urea will not have. and it has a lot of carbon, which is important for the organic matter and beneficial for our soil. And it is actually beneficial, contrary to what you might think, to the invertebrates and earthworms. Any of you that farm and use anhydrous injection, ammonia, anytime you inject that in the ground, it will kill the soil invertebrates and the earthworms within a certain distance of that. So from that standpoint, it is less harmful than a lot of commercial fertilizer. And I've heard a lot about pollution potential. Yes, it probably does have pollution, but it's really no more than any city in Kansas, because the MPEDS, which is a National Pollution Elimination Discharge System that every wastewater treatment plant in your city has, this is exactly the same kind of permit that will be regulated through the EPA down through our state sponsoring organization, KDA. Or KDHE. So that will be regulated. It poses no more issue in that processing than anything. And if a chicken processing plant comes to Montgomery, it will be located about 6 or 7 miles from the Oklahoma-Kansas state line. And in some ways that's good, others bad. Many of the houses, of the grower houses, will be located into Oklahoma. We had meetings with our local officials, our school people. There was concern about overloading our school system. The benefit being so close, because you guys have raised property taxes so high, we have a lot of those border people moved to Oklahoma. So our property, a lot of those houses will be in Oklahoma. A lot of the workers will come from Oklahoma, and actually the impact on schools will be spread out. So I'm hearing from a lot of my constituents. Many oppose based on myth, and I also hear from people who just want and need a job to feed their family. So in closing, Montgomery County lost over 1,500 jobs in about the last 3 years. It seems like we have a trend down in our country that once the 10-year tax abatement expires, so does the company. They move off to bigger and better places. And so, yeah, the entry is $13.50 an hour. None of the other area business and manufacturers seem concerned that this would draw a lot of people away from them. But you have to realize that 25% will be in the $20 to $30 an hour, so that is good. I will be supporting Senate Bill 405, and I don't want to stand before you today to be a beta man. I ask that you do the same, and I would echo my comments from my fellow Montgomery County legislature. I have a lot of faith in my state university, and particularly tonight. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Carlin of Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to correct something, and I would even say if the body is interested, you know, maybe we should revote if my remarks made a problem for us on the petition bill, because I did support that. I did say I thought it was redundant. I hope I didn't influence anybody the wrong way, but I'm trying to check with revisers on it, and petition law is pretty vague. Cities can do this. Cities have it in their power to, it's in the city's rules, that home rule law, that they can, people can petition, and they have to, you know, they have to take it up. Counties, I think some counties have this, some counties don't. And in some counties, it can be advisory only, and the county commission could ignore it. So I don't want to steer anybody astray. And Mr. Chair, I don't know what the process should be on this. I'm just making that clear that I didn't speak exactly correctly, because I asked somebody and they said it was redundant, but maybe not. So is there a ruling, or what do we do about that? Just telling you my remarks might have been mistaken.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Anybody here want? I don't think I can call the question, but But if anybody wants to revote, I guess somebody can make that motion. I'm not. It was a pretty resounding no, but you know, I want to offer that. And also want to say that I did a lot of work on this too, and I was raised in Southeast Kansas, and my little community is just dwindling. And I have said all along, if I could help Southeast Kansas with economic development, I would do that. And also we heard from Cloud County that their community is very interested, and there's another community that I'm not sure has been very clear about it, that they also are interested in this project. So for that reason, if the communities are going to come together and say, hey, let's have this, you know, how can I sit here and say, let's don't? When my husband wanted to open the first dental HMO probably in the United States, and we came to Kansas, we wanted it to be Manhattan Dental HMO, and we couldn't do it because the laws were too restrictive. In the last few years, we've taken away those issues, but we had to open our company in Missouri. It became Kansas City Dental Care. You know, we've got to be open for business. There's a lot of good regulation in this law, and we're already protected by the EPA, and some of us don't like the EPA, but some of us need it sometimes. So thank you very much. I just stand in support of the bill, and I hope you'll support it.
Chair recognizes Representative Kelly of Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand in support of this bill, and my county is one of the two that's in play, but I stand in support of the bill because I think we're at a point of opening up a new industry with the technology that's going to provide a community. Whoever gets it in Kansas and in the future with plants is going to provide new operations that we can have kids that we educate at K-State and others in this that have the ability to come back home. In the case of this plant, maybe 250 jobs that are more high-tech, and it's just an opportunity that we have ourselves. We don't know that we'll get a plant, but it opens up the opportunity for the poultry industry in Kansas. I think it can be very beneficial to the state in the years ahead, and I would appreciate your support of this bill that we can put Kansas in a position to capture a new industry in our state.
The chair recognizes Representative Dove of Leavenworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, when this first came to our Leavenworth County residents, as a previous representative stated, we were notified one day before it actually took place. The announcement of a chicken processing plant, chicken farms, and it took us by surprise. And when I asked the past administration, our governor, why were we not given proper notification of this, his answer was, it was their decision to do it. Having as much respect for our administration as I do, I went ahead and let that subject go, because it did need explanation. Individuals in the area where I live were adamantly opposed to any chicken farms in their area. As the previous speaker said, when I put this together, because that's where it had happened, that's how it happened, individuals were very upset. And I got to say, I was upset also because the elected officials of the 38th district, 39th district, those individuals in the immediate area were not given proper notice. And then we were asked by the individuals when I took a trip to the plant in Tennessee, how do you feel about us? My answer was, there is no smell. And that's what I was asked at the town hall meeting. I was also asked several other questions by the individuals at the town hall that gave a lot of consideration to the health consequences of those working within the plant. Well, I must say that individuals who worked in the plant that I visited were very happy. And I'll leave that part to its own because there was no smell in new buildings around that area. I reject the language of this bill because some of the requirements are put into practice without input from the residents. And that's what I think should have happened beforehand. Your representation, the state legislators, should have been notified ahead of time so that they could have some input and possibly talk to the individuals and see what their concerns were. Well, that was not done. And when you have individuals in a bureaucracy that continues to make decisions for their citizens without their input, then you're circumventing the process. I felt it was a great opportunity, but however, if the citizens of that area do not want it, why force it upon them? They live there, we live there, so we should not put ourselves in high authority to say what they must or must not do because that's their community. It's my community. One of the reasons that I came up here today was to make it absolutely clear that the company did not give the information that was asked for by the state legislator and senator. We asked for information back so we could have something valid to give the citizens. That did not happen. But yet this company wanted us to take the responsibility of doing their job. And their job was to let the citizens of that county know ahead of time. I will not be voting for this bill. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Concanon of Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the finalist communities for the development of poultry production is in Cloud County, which is part of my district. I know that this bill has nothing to do with choosing which community will be awarded this opportunity, but I want to share with you that my district welcomes this facility. One of the top priorities of this special recruitment committee formed for this cause was to be forthcoming and as transparent as possible. Data was gathered, speakers brought in, they had community meetings with hundreds of farmers showing up. There were segments scheduled in the media. There was a fact of the day on social media. These were all opportunities to share concerns and serve as mythbusters. The reason I feel compelled to speak to this today is to share with you that with complete transparency and education on not just the economic impact, but the social impacts as well, the people of North Central Kansas find this to be a great fit for our economic development. This bill is another piece of the puzzle that needs to be put into place to advance this recruitment process. I ask you to vote yes on the bill and allow the Kansas ag industry this opportunity to open the state to poultry production. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Carlskent of Leavenworth.
For the second time, I'm here to address the bill. You know, there's no surprise that I would be voting no, and I know we need to get moving. But there's a couple things that I did want to bring up. First of all, in committee testimony the other day, we heard about other states and how liberal they are. In Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Grand Lake Basin will not let these places in, okay? Now, does that tell you anything? Secondly, when we've heard a lot about, we heard it in committee, we've even heard today, let's open up Kansas, the open for business signs in Kansas. Folks, the open for business sign was on September the 5th when Governor Brownback came to Leavenworth. In my opinion, we don't need this bill, and I'll vote against it. But the bottom line is, Tyson has put pressure on Ag and KDHE to get this through. You know, it's pretty simple, but as I stated, you know, are you going to represent your constituents? Are you representing something else? And I will vote no. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Hibbard of Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope as we wind this down, we haven't ruffled too many feathers. I did have a speech all lined out, but I'm just going to wing it. So my words may be a little scrambled. I just want to spend a couple of minutes and tell you of an experience that my wife and I had. I shared this in caucus, and I won't belabor the point, but I got involved in helping with a group of people in Montgomery County wanting to work at inviting poultry processing into their area. And I found out that Tyson had a plant in Monette, Missouri. And so my wife Cindy and I went to Monette and spent a day looking for things that might be wrong, because I didn't want to get involved in something that was going to come back and embarrass me. We toured the area, we talked to the people, we looked at their processing facility, we looked at their hatchery, we looked at their feed processing facility. We went out in the country, we drove around and looked at their brooder houses. We rolled down the windows looking for smell. We never found anything. I came back feeling real strong that this would be a great industry to bring into southeast Kansas. 1,600 jobs is nothing to sneeze at, and it certainly is nothing to sneeze at if you're in Montgomery County and you've been through what they've been through the last 5 years. I also understand and I fully support my good friend from Concordia. And if we can get this thing going, there's no reason that we can't have poultry processing places in both areas. They both are welcoming them, the communities are welcoming, and hopefully we as a state legislature will welcome them to Kansas. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Prahl of Labatt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the hour's late. I do represent part of Montgomery County. Montgomery County Action Council, they've worked diligently to be open, to allow everybody, all the views to be presented. And I might add, the support is overwhelming. Value-added, to ag products, extremely important to agriculture. You produce the grain, you produce the poultry, you process the product, and then you're able to ship it out. The value-added process of it is extremely important. I would ask you to please, I will be supporting Senate Bill 405. I would strongly suggest that it's in the best interest of Kansas that we all consider this value-added for agriculture and for jobs and for jobs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Dirks of Saline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just came up here to give you a little bit of information. Several years ago, I was a marketing director for a trade publication for the commercial industrial agribusiness, and it was my job to go to different trade shows. I also represented the oil industry, but this particular trade show that I went to was the International Poultry Show in Atlanta, Georgia. I didn't know what to expect when I got there, just a bunch of chickens and eggs, but it took the space of almost one of your huge Astrodomes. It was totally amazing what type of marketing, economic development that is involved in the poultry industry. They had equipment there that boxed the eggs. They had chick eliminators. They had any possible thing. They showed how the chickens are processed, and I mean, this is all totally automated. So my thoughts are, in listening to the discussions today, I just wanted to share with you that this may also be opening up a door for some other industries that are involved in the poultry industry that may very well create some jobs in the urban areas as well. So why should we put a sign on our state line saying do not enter economic development? We have economic developers in every one of our cities trying to bring jobs for our citizens. So let's look at the whole picture. It's not perhaps just the poultry farms out in the ag industry, but the industry that we can develop by building these other elements of the poultry industry that I was just overwhelmed by what can be done economically. So I just wanted to share that with you, that let's not put that sign at our state lines. Let's invite those people who want to come in and develop economic development and create some jobs for our citizenry. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Representative Crum of Sedgwick.
Can the carrier of the bill stand for a couple of questions?
Yes, sir.
I'll try to keep this short so I don't run afoul of the body.
That sounds good. I wouldn't want to have any egg on my face.
That's right. Okay. The way this is setting up, we're gonna make it easier for poultry plants, and I know this doesn't cover the plants, but for the farms that go with the plants, it gives them easier ways to come into the counties. It gives them, it opens up the number of chicken farms that they can have and how many chickens.
Right. It would change the number of barns that they would be allowed to have. As far as what is in the working documents right now for KDHE, and so yeah, it would increase the number of barns that they could have under the environmental .003. Yes. Okay,
and there's been a lot of talk in here about if a community doesn't have it, really how much say do they have in keeping it out? And I understand that that can be done with the processing plant itself. So a county can give incentives to get a plant to come in if that county wants that plant. But if that plant was, say, put on a southeast corner of a county, and they want chicken farms in a 30 to 50 mile range, you're going to be affecting a lot of counties around that area. And agriculture doesn't have zoning regulations in counties. So these other counties around the area that would have these chicken farms, they really wouldn't have any say whether or not it happened or not. Is that correct?
Well, the counties wouldn't. I imagine if there was enough people that got up in arms, a farmer probably wouldn't want to put barns up. But you got to realize that this is, in order to put up any type of operation with, say, like 8 barns or 4 or 5 barns, you're talking 200 acres that landowner is going to have to own. They're not going to be able to just put it in 20, 40 acres. You're going to have, because of all the setbacks, because of all the, you're going to have around 200 acres. So you're talking landowners that have quite a bit of area around them, and you know, I can foresee probably some of them putting them, you know, a certain distance from their own homesteads, just because of the ease of being able to get to their facilities and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. I know we've got a handful of counties that are really looking forward to this opportunity, and I understand that. However, this bill doesn't just deal with those counties, it opens the whole state. And you're going to have some counties that could have chicken farms come in, and they really have no way to regulate that or to stop it if the county doesn't really want it. And we had somebody up here earlier talked about they had 3 county commissioners. In Sedgwick County we have 5. And sometimes if commissioners think that they have a better agenda than cities do, there's areas of influence where if something's going to happen in zoning in a county or something's going to happen in the county, they have to let cities weigh in. And just a few years ago when a new trash site was going to come into Sedgwick County, suddenly the area of influence the county was going to recognize shrunk from 3 miles to 1.5 miles. So you do have to worry about what a small group of county commissioners could come up with. I support bringing in something that's going to help boost the economy. I'm going to vote against this bill mainly because it opens stuff up for the whole state. If we could find a way to target this for communities and counties that really wanted it and we knew they were going to be contained in that counties, then I could probably support it, although I have some concerns with water pollution. But just because it opens up for the whole state, and I think some counties could get some of this even though they don't want it and they couldn't really do anything about it because of the zoning regulations for agriculture. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Schrader of McPherson.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I'll be very brief. I know we've discussed this and considered it for quite some time, but just a couple of very brief points that I think are important to remember. And the first thing is that this is something that is industry requested. The Department of Ag, the Department of Health and Environment, as well as the livestock industry came together and requested this. They want to know, they need to know what the rules of engagement are. And that's what this bill sets out. These are the rules of engagement. If you want to come here, this is what you have to do. So keep that in mind. The second thing that I'd like to comment on, and again I want to be brief, is that in northeast Kansas, as well as in Sedgwick County, if they didn't want these types of facilities there, I would surmise that the system worked. You know, there was enough protest, there was enough outcry that the system worked. They're not going to go there because it was very clear that they really weren't, that really was not the right place for them. There are places that are the right place. There are areas where it is the right place to put these types of facilities. And I just encourage your support for this bill. In my area, as in many areas, there are places that are absolutely the right place. There are some places that would not be the right place. But let the communities figure that out. So I support this bill. I hope you will as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there others wishing to speak to Senate Bill 405? Seeing none, Representative Hoffman, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to reiterate this passed out 29-10 in the Senate and 18-4 out of our House committee. And I certainly don't want to count the chickens before they hatch, but I hope that this will pass and not become a foul bill. So with that, Mr. Chairman, when the committee rises and reports, I move that we report Senate Bill 405 favorable for passage.
Bingo. You've heard the motion by Representative Hoffman. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. It's too late. It's too late. It's already called. This concludes general orders. The chair recognizes Representative Heinemann, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
The clerk will read.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole recommends Senate Bill 405 be passed.
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The committee report is adopted. Messages from the governor.
House Bill number 2439, Caitlin's Law, has been signed into law, approved March 9, 2018. Jeff Collier, Governor.
Reports of standing committee. The clerk will read.
Committee on Transportation recommends Senate Bill 375 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Transportation recommends Senate Bill 324 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Taxation recommends House Bill 2537 be passed. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2545 be amended by substituting a new bill to be designated as substitute for House Bill number 2545 as follows. An act concerning gaming relating to the Kansas Expanded Lottery Act, relating to the state debtor set-off program, relating to horse and greyhound racing, creating the Kansas Horse Council Fund, and the substitute bill be passed.
Chair recognizes the Majority Leader to move on adoption of the calendar committee report.
Oh, wait, one more.
Hold on a second.
I'll read the calendar.
The clerk hasn't read yet. The clerk will read.
Here it is. Committee on Calendar and Printing recommends on requests for resolutions and certificates that requests by Representatives Lewis, Trimmer, Hibbard, Epley, Sywert, Arend, and Garber be approved, and the Chief Clerk of the House be directed to order the printing of said certificates and the drafting of said resolutions.
Majority Leader Heinemann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the calendar and printing report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. A change of reference. House Bill 2755 is withdrawn from the committee of the House Committee of the Whole and re-referred to the Committee on Taxation. Announcements. Representative Whipple.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Democratic Caucus, we will have agenda Monday at 8:30 a.m. 8:30 a.m. on Monday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans, we will have calendar review at 8:30 a.m. Monday morning. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Monday, March 12th at 11 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.